My husband and I have been married for a little over 5 years. I have a 19-year-old daughter from a previous relationship, and while their relationship has always been decent, not exactly father and daughter, but a respectful bond, they've never been particularly close. It's always been a dynamic where she could ask for advice if needed, and he would support her, but nothing beyond that. In all the time we've been together, I've never noticed anything inappropriate or strange about how my husband interacts with my daughter, nor has she ever expressed discomfort or raised concerns. But all of that changed in an instant, throwing my family into complete chaos. It was an ordinary Thursday evening. My husband and I were watching a movie in the living room when he got up to use the bathroom. From where I was sitting, I heard him knock on the bathroom door twice, 3 firm knocks each time, spaced a few seconds apart. He then opened the door, and moments later, I heard screaming. I ran to the hallway and saw my daughter, completely naked, covering herself while yelling at my husband to get out. He was visibly flustered, stumbling over his own feet as he tried to close the door. When I asked him what happened, he explained that he had knocked, gotten no response, and assumed the bathroom was empty. My daughter later admitted she hadn't heard him because she had her earbuds in, listening to music. After everyone had calmed down, my husband apologized to my daughter, explaining it was an honest mistake. She apologized for yelling at him, saying she was just startled. They even hugged, and I thought the matter was resolved. But that was far from the truth. The next day, I started receiving angry calls from family members. My sister was the first, berating me for allowing a creep like my husband to stay in the house. Confused and shocked, I asked what she meant. That's when I learned that my daughter had told a very different version of events. According to her story, my husband ignored her response and walked in on her intentionally. This version of events spread quickly, and before I knew it, my husband's name was being dragged through the mud by my family. No one seemed interested in hearing the truth, and my daughter insisted she hadn't told anyone that version of the story, blaming her cousin for misinterpreting a conversation they'd had. When I confronted her, she broke down in tears, admitting she had made up scenarios while talking to her cousin. She claimed she didn't think it would go this far and believed it would blow over, because everyone knew my husband wouldn't do something like that. But the damage was already done. The lies spread like wildfire. My husband became the target of vile accusations, including being labeled a creep and worse. Some of my family members even contacted his workplace, forcing him to explain himself to HR. Thankfully, his employers believed him, but the stress was unbearable. He began to fear every knock at the door, worried the police would show up based on baseless accusations. Despite my efforts to clear his name, including sharing hallway camera footage that showed him knocking before entering, my family refused to believe it. They claimed the lack of audio proved nothing and clung to the lie that my daughter had responded before he entered. My daughter's refusal to publicly admit the truth only fueled their hatred. My husband, unable to cope with the mounting stress, packed his bags and left to stay with his parents. He said he couldn't live in a home where he was vilified for something he didn't do. He expressed fear and heartbreak, telling me he loved me but couldn't continue living under these circumstances. I demanded that my daughter clear my husband's name, but she refused, saying it was too late and that people wouldn't believe her. Frustrated and heartbroken, I told her that if her lies led to a divorce, she would have to move out. I couldn't forgive her for destroying the man who had been nothing but kind and supportive to both of us. She promised to fix it, but it was clear she was only saying that because she saw the consequences of her actions. My husband returned briefly to discuss the situation. He showed me messages from family members, some of whom had gone as far as to accuse him of being a predator. He told me he couldn't stay in a marriage where his reputation and safety were constantly at risk. He said he loved me but couldn't imagine a future where he wasn't haunted by these accusations. I begged him to reconsider. I offered to cut ties with my family and even asked my daughter to move out permanently. But he said the damage was irreparable. My family's hatred, my daughter's lies, and the fear of being falsely accused again had broken him. He said he didn't want me to abandon my daughter, but he couldn't live in a home where he felt unsafe and mistrusted. The divorce became inevitable. My husband filed for separation, citing irreconcilable differences. He said he would give me 3 months to move out of his house, as it was his property before our marriage. He also withdrew financial support for my daughter, including her college tuition. She tried to apologize to him, but he obtained a restraining order after she violated his boundaries by showing up at his home uninvited. I've since moved out and am staying with a friend while I try to rebuild my life. My daughter has also left, cutting off contact with me entirely. She blamed me for siding with my husband and not supporting her when things spiraled out of control. My ex-husband has become cold and distant, refusing any contact beyond the divorce proceedings. He told me he no longer trusts me or my family and just wants to move on. Despite everything, I still love him and wish I could undo the damage. But I know now that some things can't be fixed. I've been accused of choosing my husband over my daughter, but I can't ignore the fact that her lies destroyed a good man. I've lost everything: my husband, my daughter, and the life we built together. I stood by the truth, but in the end, it wasn't enough to save my marriage. Now, I'm left wondering if I could have done more to prevent this from spiraling out of control. Last weekend, I got married. It was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, but instead, I'm left feeling angry and frustrated. My brother turned my wedding into a spectacle, taking all the attention off me and my husband. Normally, I don't mind not being the center of attention, but this was my wedding day. And now, it feels like no one even remembers the ceremony or reception, just the drama my brother caused. We planned a destination wedding, nothing extravagant, just within the US, with close family and friends. My parents generously paid for our immediate family to arrive 5 days early to spend time together and prepare for the big day. My brother arrived a few days later, and he had told us he was bringing a date, a girl from school, he said. No big deal. But when my parents went to pick him up at the airport, there he was, holding hands with a visibly pregnant woman none of us had ever met. My parents were understandably shocked. My mom told me later that she felt faint, and my dad couldn't hold back a "What the F have you done?" My brother greeted them casually, as if nothing was out of the ordinary, and then introduced this woman without giving any real explanation. She looked uncomfortable from the moment she arrived. After the long flight, she said she wasn't feeling well and went to lie down, leaving the rest of us to have dinner without her. The atmosphere at the table was tense. My mom finally broke the silence and asked my brother outright, "Is that your baby?" By this point, we'd all assumed the baby was his, but my mom needed confirmation. His response caught us off guard. He admitted that it wasn't technically his baby, but he was in love with this woman and intended to be the baby's father anyway. Apparently, the biological father wasn't involved, and my brother planned to marry her and adopt the baby. This revelation was a lot to take in. My brother is 21, about to graduate college, and planning to go to law school. He's always been ambitious and focused, so the idea of him taking on the responsibility of raising someone else's child, without even introducing us to this woman before, was baffling. My parents, especially my mom, were overwhelmed. All weekend, they were more focused on strategizing how to change his mind than on celebrating my wedding. On the day of the wedding, things escalated further. During the family photo session, my brother insisted that his date be included in the pictures. I was stunned. She wasn't family. None of us had met her before that weekend, and she'd only been in our lives for 2 days. It felt inappropriate to have her in pictures that were meant to represent our family. I told my brother no. This was my wedding, and I didn't want someone we barely knew in these lasting memories. My mom intervened, suggesting we let her be in just one picture, which we wouldn't have to display. Reluctantly, I agreed, but it made my blood boil. It felt like the focus was shifting away from me and my husband to this random, heavily pregnant woman hitching herself to my brother. Looking back, I don't think my brother should have brought her at all, especially without warning. The entire weekend, my family was consumed by gossip and speculation. My brother didn't even correct people who assumed the baby was his, claiming it was awkward for her to explain the full story. This only fueled the chatter and took attention away from the wedding. Since the wedding, I vented to friends and coworkers, and opinions are split. Some, including my mom, say I'm overreacting and need to accept the situation. But others, including my coworkers, think my brother's actions were completely inappropriate and rude. I can't help but feel that his decision to bring her, without giving any prior context, was thoughtless and overshadowed what was supposed to be my special day. Am I the ass for being upset that my brother brought his pregnant girlfriend to my wedding and insisted on including her in family photos? Maybe. But after everything, I still feel like I had every right to set boundaries for my own wedding. Life hasn't been easy, but I've worked hard to give my son 16 a bright future. His father and I were married for 2 years before he cheated on me, leading to our divorce. Since then, he's had 3 more children, a son 13, a daughter 12, and another son 10, all from the affair. While I've moved forward and focused on my son, the past seems determined to intrude on the life I've built for us. After the divorce, I made a conscious decision to prioritize my son's well-being. I've stayed single, even though I'm in a committed relationship, because I wanted to create a stable environment for him. My partner and I plan to marry after our children are in college. For now, my focus is solely on my son. My parents were an immense support system, and their tragic passing left a hole in our lives. However, I inherited one of their properties, which is now our home, and another went to my sister. With no mortgage and income from rental properties and my successful bakery business, I've been able to provide my son with a comfortable life. He attends a prestigious private school, and I've saved diligently for his future. My sacrifices have ensured he'll be able to study in the US, just as he's always dreamed. While my son's life is stable, my ex-husband's household operates very differently. His family lives a middle-class lifestyle, and they can't afford the same opportunities. For instance, while my son and I take yearly vacations abroad, his half-siblings do not. This disparity has created resentment on their end, and my ex has tried to level the playing field, often at my expense. Once, he attempted to change my son's school behind my back to one more aligned with his other children's. I had to get a court order to stop it. He's also asked me to contribute to his other children's expenses and even demanded I buy them gifts and take them on vacations. I've refused each time. My son's life and future are my responsibility, not theirs. My son is clear about his boundaries with his half-siblings. He calls them half-siblings, which infuriates my ex and his wife, but I've left that choice to him. While my son doesn't badmouth them, he doesn't go out of his way to form close relationships either. I've respected his decisions, even when they've led to conflict. For example, when my son received an expensive motorcycle for his 16th birthday, his half-siblings damaged some of his belongings out of jealousy. Since then, he's stopped sharing his things with them. My ex tried to force the issue, but a court ruled that my son could keep his possessions wherever he wanted, including at his father's house. Despite all this, I've ensured my son treats them fairly. He takes them out for birthdays, for which I cover the expenses. But I refuse to extend those efforts further. They're not my responsibility, and I won't compromise my son's lifestyle or plans to appease my ex's family. The latest conflict has taken things to a new level. My son is preparing to study in the US, something I've worked hard to save for over the years. My ex, however, is demanding he give up those plans because he won't be able to afford similar opportunities for his other children. He claims it's unfair for one child to receive more than the others, but I disagree. My son's future shouldn't be sacrificed because of his father's decisions. When my son learned about his father's demand, he was furious. They argued, and now my son refuses to speak to him. My ex has been relentless, even trying to guilt me into agreeing. He and his wife have started bashing me, calling me a bitter ex. In response, I reminded him that he's a cheating scumbag and referred to his wife as a glorified bedwarmer. Admittedly, that wasn't my proudest moment, but I've had enough of their constant meddling. I won't let my ex dictate my son's future or undermine the life I've built for him. My son is my priority, and I've worked too hard to let anyone take that away. Am I a bitter ex for refusing to accommodate my ex-husband's new family? Maybe. but I refuse to apologize for protecting my son's dreams and ensuring he has every opportunity to succeed.
Jess and I have been married for 13 years, and after enduring financial struggles in our 20s and early 30s, we're finally in a position to travel once or twice a year. The problem? Jess only wants to go to Disney World. Don't get me wrong, I love that she has a passion, but this isn't just a fondness, it's an obsession. Every trip we've ever taken, including our honeymoon, has been to Disney. 9 trips, 9 sets of Mickey Mouse ears, countless ice cream bars shaped like the mouse, endless photos in front of Cinderella's castle. Every single vacation has been a rinse and repeat cycle of the same Disney routine. I'm tired of it. No, I'm beyond tired of it. I'm Disneyed out. When planning our next trip for April, Jess naturally defaulted to Disney. This time, I suggested something different: Hawaii. I painted the picture of relaxing on beaches, enjoying serene spas, and exploring a new kind of paradise. Jess seemed confused by the idea but didn't outright reject it. A few days later, she told me she'd made hotel reservations, which I initially took as a positive sign, until she revealed the hotel was Aulani, the Disney resort in Hawaii. My heart sank. Frustrated, I told Jess that I was done with Disney and wanted a genuinely different experience. She defended her choice, claiming it was a compromise and that I should appreciate her effort. To me, it felt like yet another attempt to tie every trip to Disney. I asked if she considered anything else, and when she said no, I told her I wasn't going. Jess was upset and canceled the reservation. She even started making plans to go to Disney World with a friend instead. At first, I stood my ground, but as the days passed, guilt crept in. I realized I hadn't been fair. Jess had made an effort. Aulani wasn't exactly Disney World. It was a step toward compromise, and I had shut her down without really considering her feelings. I apologized, admitting that I'd acted out of frustration and hadn't given her idea a fair shot. When I did some research, I saw that Aulani didn't even look like a typical Disney resort. It was more of a Hawaiian escape with subtle Disney touches. Jess admitted she'd chosen it because her sister said it was beautiful, not just because it was Disney-owned. I felt like an idiot. We rebooked Aulani, and for the first time, I was genuinely excited about a vacation we both agreed on. Just as we were settling into our plans, life threw us a curveball. A few days after Christmas, Jess accidentally backed her car into our garage door. The loud bang sent me running outside, where I found her holding her neck in pain. I rushed her to the hospital, and while the x-rays came back fine, the doctor said she likely had whiplash. We assumed she'd recover quickly, but 2 weeks later, Jess was still experiencing headaches, neck pain, and numbness in her fingers. She approached me hesitantly, saying she wasn't confident she could handle the long flight to Hawaii in a few months. She apologized profusely, even though she had nothing to feel sorry for. While discussing alternatives, Jess mentioned that Disney World might be a better option. She explained how accessible it is, with electric conveyance vehicle, ECV, rentals, and plenty of options to take it easy if needed. Although it wasn't my dream vacation, I knew Jess's health had to come first. I agreed, and we made our reservations. I'll admit, this wasn't the conclusion I'd hoped for, and it's far from my ideal getaway. But seeing Jess happy, especially after her accident, matters more to me than where we go. Maybe someday we'll have the Hawaiian vacation we planned, but for now, I'll endure one more round of Mickey ears and castle photos for her.